The autumn air in Boston carried the crisp promise of winter as Tom Brady walked into Marcus Restaurant, one of the city's most prestigious dining establishments. After retiring from professional football, Tom had been exploring new ventures, including potential partnerships with high-end hospitality businesses. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be a quiet business meeting with restaurant investors. As he settled into his reserved corner table, Tom noticed a commotion near the main dining area. Raised voices cut through the typical evening ambiance, and he could see staff members gathering around what appeared to be a heated discussion. "I'm telling you, this is completely unacceptable," came a voice Tom immediately recognized. Denzel Washington, the acclaimed actor, stood near table 12, his usually composed demeanor clearly strained. "I've been coming to this establishment for years, and I've never experienced such blatant disrespect." Sarah Mitchell, a young waitress who had been working at Marcus for only 3 months, stood with tears welling in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she held a notepad, clearly overwhelmed by the situation unfolding around her. "Mr. Washington, please, I can explain," Sarah began, but her voice cracked under the pressure. The restaurant manager, David Chen, hurried over, his face flushed with anxiety. "Sir, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Sarah is one of our most dedicated staff members." Tom watched as other diners began turning their attention to the scene. He could see phones being discreetly pulled out, and he knew that in today's social media world, this situation could spiral out of control within minutes. Denzel's voice carried across the restaurant. "A misunderstanding?" She completely ignored my table for 20 minutes. Then when I asked for service, she rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. This kind of behavior is exactly what's wrong with service industry attitudes today. Sarah's supervisor, Maria Rodriguez, stepped forward. "Mr. Washington, I apologize profusely. Sarah has been dealing with some personal issues lately, but that's no excuse for poor service." "Personal issues don't excuse professional disrespect," Denzel replied firmly, though Tom could detect a hint of regret in the actor's tone, as if he was beginning to realize the scene was escalating beyond his intention. Tom Brady made a decision. Rising from his table, he approached the group with the same calm confidence that had served him well during countless high-pressure moments on the football field. "Excuse me," Tom said gently, his presence immediately commanding attention. I couldn't help but notice there seems to be some confusion here. Perhaps we could all take a step back and figure this out together." The restaurant fell silent. Denzel turned, recognizing Tom immediately. "Tom Brady, what are you doing here?" "Having dinner just like you," Tom replied with a slight smile. "But it seems like we've got a situation that might benefit from a cooler head. Mind if I help sort this out?" Tom's intervention created a momentary pause in the tension. David Chen quickly arranged for them to move to a private dining room, away from the curious eyes of other patrons. Sarah, still visibly shaken, was invited to join them along with Maria Rodriguez. "All right," Tom said, settling into his chair with the same methodical approach he'd used to analyze game footage. "Let's hear everyone's side of this. Sarah, why don't you start?" Sarah wiped her eyes with a napkin, taking a shaky breath. I wasn't ignoring Mr. Washington on purpose. My section was completely slammed tonight, and I was covering for Jessica, who called in sick. When I finally got to his table, I was so overwhelmed that I guess I looked frustrated, but it wasn't directed at him." She paused, looking down at her hands, "and I didn't roll my eyes. I was actually trying not to cry, because earlier today I found out my mom needs surgery, and we don't have insurance to cover it. I've been working double shifts all week trying to figure out how to help her." Denzel's expression immediately softened. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "But when you started raising your voice, everyone was staring, and I just felt so small. I've been trying so hard to do a good job here because I need this position, Tom nodded thoughtfully. Denzel, what did you see from your perspective? The actor shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I saw what I interpreted as dismissive behavior. In my experience, that kind of attitude often stems from assumptions people make about celebrities. Either they expect special treatment, or they deliberately provide poor service to make a point. Which assumptions have you encountered more often? Tom asked. Honestly, both, Denzel admitted. I've had servers fawn over me to the point of disrupting other diners, and I've had others treat me poorly because they assume I'm arrogant or demanding. I suppose I've become defensive about it. Maria Rodriguez spoke up. Mr. Washington, Sarah genuinely didn't recognize you initially. She's been so focused on her work and her family situation that she hasn't been following entertainment. News? Tom leaned forward. So we have a hard-working young woman dealing with a family crisis and an accomplished man who's had his guard up because of past experiences. Neither of you meant to hurt the other. Sarah looked at Denzel directly for the first time. Mr. Washington, I'm truly sorry if I seemed rude. I've so much respect for your work. My dad and I used to watch your movies together all the time. I would never intentionally disrespect you. Denzel's shoulders visibly relaxed. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I jumped to conclusions without understanding your situation. That wasn't fair to you. But there's still a bigger issue here, Tom observed. This situation escalated in a public space, and in today's world, that can have consequences beyond this room. David Chen nodded grimly. Several people were recording. There are probably videos online already. Tom pulled out his phone and did a quick search. His expression grew serious. There are already 3 different versions posted on social media. 2 make it look like Denzel was being unreasonably demanding, and 1 makes it seem like Sarah was being deliberately disrespectful. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Denzel said, running his hand over his face. Sarah, I'm so sorry. This could affect your job, your reputation. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. I can't lose this job. My mom. You're not going to lose your job, Tom said firmly. But we need to get ahead of this story before it spirals completely out of control. The next morning, Tom Brady sat in his home office overlooking Tampa Bay, despite having moved back to Boston area recently for business. He'd been up since 5 a.m., making calls and working on a strategy to help both Denzel and Sarah navigate the social media storm that had erupted overnight. The hashtag #WaitressGate was trending, with thousands of comments ranging from supportive to vitriolic. Some defended Denzel, others championed Sarah, but most were simply adding fuel to a fire neither of them had intended to start. Tom's phone rang. Denzel? Tom, thank you for taking my call. I've been thinking about this all night. I need to make this right, but I'm not sure how. I've been working on that, Tom replied. First question, are you willing to be completely transparent about what happened? Absolutely. I made a mistake and I want to own it. Good. And I spoke with Sarah this morning. She's willing to participate in setting the record straight, but she's scared about the attention. Tom had indeed called Marcus Restaurant early that morning and spoken with David Chen, who had put him in touch with Sarah. The young woman had been overwhelmed by the overnight attention, with friends and strangers alike messaging her about the videos. What did you have in mind? Denzel asked. A joint video statement, but not just addressing the incident, using it as an opportunity to talk about something bigger. Sarah mentioned her mother's medical situation. What if we could turn this negative attention into something positive? Denzel was quiet for a moment. You're thinking about helping with her mother's medical expenses? I'm thinking about doing more than that. Sarah's situation isn't unique. There are thousands of service industry workers dealing with medical debt and lack of insurance. What if we created a foundation? That's actually brilliant, Denzel said slowly. Turn a moment of misunderstanding into a force for good. Exactly, but it has to be genuine, and it has to involve Sarah as a partner, not just a recipient. She's smart, she's hardworking, and she understands the struggles of people in her situation better than we do. Tom had been impressed by Sarah's composure during their phone conversation that morning. Despite her fear about the social media attention, she had spoken thoughtfully about the challenges facing restaurant workers, many of whom were dealing with similar financial pressures. "When do you want to do this?" Denzel asked. "This afternoon. The longer we wait, the more the narrative gets away from us. I've already reached out to a friend who runs a media company. We can film something professional, but authentic." And Sarah agreed to this? She did, but she asked for one thing. She wants to donate her first month's salary from any foundation work to another family in need. She said she doesn't want people to think she created drama just to get help. Denzel chuckled, and Tom could hear the admiration in his voice. "She sounds like she has more character than both of us combined." "That's exactly why this will work," Tom said. "People respond to authenticity, and there's nothing more authentic than three people who made mistakes, owned them, and decided to do something positive instead of just moving on." They spent the next hour planning the details. Tom would use his media connections to ensure wide distribution. Denzel would leverage his Hollywood relationships to bring attention to the foundation. And Sarah would provide the perspective and credibility that would make people believe in their mission. "Tom," Denzel said as their call was ending, "why are you doing this? You could have just walked away last night." Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own journey from football superstar to businessman to someone trying to make a meaningful impact. "Because I've learned that the moments when we have the most to lose by helping someone are usually the moments when we have the most to gain by doing it anyway." The small studio space in downtown Boston felt intimate despite the professional lighting and camera equipment. Tom had arranged for his friend Marcus Thompson, a documentary filmmaker, to handle the production. The goal was to create something that felt like a conversation, not a scripted apology. Sarah arrived first, wearing a simple blue dress that Tom's assistant had helped her select. She looked nervous but determined. "I still can't believe this is happening," she said to Tom, as a makeup artist applied light powder to reduce glare. "Believe it," Tom replied. "And remember, we're not here to apologize for being human. We're here to show how humans can do better." Denzel arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a leather notebook. "I've been writing down thoughts all morning," he explained. "I want to make sure I say this right." Marcus Thompson gathered them around a simple table with 3 chairs. "We're going to film this as one continuous conversation. No scripts, no retakes, unless there's a technical problem. Just 3 people talking honestly about what happened and what they want to do about it." The camera began rolling. "3 days ago, I had what I thought was a simple dinner reservation," Denzel began, looking directly into the camera. "By the end of the evening, I had learned something important about assumptions, pressure, and the power of choosing understanding over judgment." Sarah picked up the narrative. "I was having the worst day of my life, professionally speaking. I was overwhelmed, scared about my mother's health, and trying to do a job I care about while dealing with personal stress. When a situation escalated in the restaurant where I work, I learned that everyone carries burdens we can't see." Tom leaned forward slightly. "And I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is step into a situation that has nothing to do with you, because that's when you discover it has everything to do with who you want to be." They spent the next 45 minutes sharing the full story: Sarah's family situation, Denzel's past experiences with service interactions, Tom's decision to intervene, and their collective realization that the incident could become something meaningful. "We're announcing today the creation of the Service Heroes Foundation," Tom said. "This organization will provide emergency financial assistance to restaurant and hospitality workers facing medical crises, educational opportunities for career advancement, and healthcare support for an industry that often goes without." Denzel nodded. "Sarah will be joining as our Director of Worker Advocacy. She understands these challenges firsthand, and she'll ensure that our help reaches the people who need it most." Sarah's voice was steady as she spoke directly to the camera. "To everyone who's been following this story, thank you for caring enough to have opinions. But instead of arguing about who was right or wrong, I hope you'll consider supporting workers in your own community who are facing similar struggles." After the cameras stopped rolling, the three of them sat quietly for a moment. "How do you think people will respond?" Sarah asked. "Honestly," Tom replied, "some will love it, some will hate it, and some will say we're just doing this for publicity. But the people who matter, the ones who understand that everyone deserves dignity and support, those people will help us make this work." Marcus Thompson showed them a rough cut of the video within an hour. The conversation felt natural, honest, and purposeful. "This is going to resonate," he told them. "You can see the genuine emotion and commitment." Tom posted the video simultaneously across his social media platforms at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, with Denzel sharing it across his networks at the same moment. The caption was simple: "Sometimes the best thing that can come from a misunderstanding is understanding." Service heroes within. 2 hours, the video had been viewed 500,000 times. Comments ranged from supportive to skeptical, but the overwhelming sentiment was positive. More importantly, the first donations to the Service Heroes Foundation began coming in before midnight. "Look at this," Sarah said, showing Tom and Denzel her phone as they shared a late dinner. "There's a server in Chicago who says she's been crying because she can't afford her daughter's asthma medication. And here's a bartender in Phoenix who's been working 3 jobs to pay for his father's cancer treatment." Denzel smiled. "This is exactly why we did this, right? It's not about us anymore." 6 weeks later, Tom Brady stood in the ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel, looking out at nearly 300 people who had gathered for the first annual Service Heroes Foundation Gala. What had started as damage control for a restaurant misunderstanding had evolved into something none of them had anticipated. Sarah Mitchell, now wearing an elegant black dress and speaking confidently into a wireless microphone, was addressing the crowd. "When I started working at Marcus Restaurant, I thought success meant getting through my shift without crying. I never imagined I'd be standing here talking to you about how we've already helped 847 families in just 6 weeks." The transformation in Sarah had been remarkable to witness. Tom had watched her grow from a scared young woman into a passionate advocate, working 12-hour days to build the foundation's programs while continuing her restaurant work part-time to stay connected to the community they served. "Our emergency medical fund has covered everything from insulin for diabetic servers to surgery costs for kitchen staff injured on the job," Sarah continued. "But more than that, we've created a network of support that reminds people in our industry that they matter." Tom had been amazed by the response. Major restaurant chains had signed on as corporate sponsors. Celebrity chefs had donated time and resources. Most importantly, hundreds of individual service workers had contributed small amounts, wanting to be part of the solution for their peers. Denzel took the stage next. "I want to talk about the power of being wrong," he began, earning surprised chuckles from the audience. 6 weeks ago, I made assumptions about a young woman's character based on a moment of interaction. I was wrong, and that wrong assumption led to something beautiful." He gestured towards Sarah, who was now sitting at a table with her mother, whose surgery had been successful and whose medical bills had been covered by the Foundation's first major expenditure. But being wrong isn't the point, Denzel continued. What we do after we realize we're wrong, that's what defines us. Sarah taught me that grace isn't just forgiving someone else's mistakes. Grace is using your mistakes to make the world a little better. The evening's highlight came when Tom announced that the Foundation had secured enough funding to launch a pilot program providing basic healthcare coverage for service industry workers in 5 major cities. This isn't charity, Tom emphasized. Sarah has made that clear from day one. This is investment in people who make our communities work. Every restaurant, every hotel, every venue that brings us together depends on dedicated professionals who deserve security and respect. As the evening wound down, Tom found himself in conversation with Maria Rodriguez, Sarah's former supervisor at Marcus Restaurant. "You know what's funny?" Maria said. "That night I thought we were dealing with a PR disaster. I never imagined it would turn into something like this." "Neither did any of us," Tom replied. "But that's the thing about genuine human connection. You never know where it's going to lead." Sarah approached them, looking tired but fulfilled. "Tom, I wanted to thank you again, not just for the Foundation, but for seeing something in that situation that the rest of us missed." "What did I see?" Tom asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "You saw that people's worst moments don't define them, but how they respond to those moments can define everything that comes next." Denzel joined their conversation, carrying his coat and preparing to leave. "Sarah, what's next for you personally? You've built something incredible here." Sarah smiled. "I'm starting college in the fall, business administration with a focus on nonprofit management. The Foundation is paying for it, but I'm also working for it." Tom convinced me that the best way to help people like me is to understand how systems work and how to change them. "And after college?" Tom asked. "I want to run for city council," Sarah said without hesitation. "Local government makes decisions about working conditions, healthcare access, and economic opportunity. If I'm going to advocate for service workers, I need to understand policy, not just problems." Tom Brady smiled, remembering his own transition from athlete to businessman, and now to philanthropist. "You know what I learned after football? The most important victories happen when nobody's keeping score." As they walked out of the hotel together, the three of them reflected on how a single evening had changed their understanding of conflict, community, and the possibility for positive change. "Do you think people will remember the original incident or the Foundation?" Sarah asked. Denzel laughed. "In 5 years, nobody will remember why we started working together. They'll just remember what we accomplished." "That's exactly the point," Tom added. "The best stories aren't about the problems people face, they're about what people build after they face them." The Service Heroes Foundation would go on to help thousands of workers, influence policy changes in multiple states, and create a model for celebrity advocacy that prioritized dignity over publicity. But that night, walking through downtown Boston, under the early winter stars, 3 people who had started as strangers were simply proud of choosing understanding over judgment and action over apathy. Sarah's mother called as they reached the street. "Honey, I watched the live stream of your speech. Your father would have been so proud." As Sarah wiped away happy tears, Tom Brady realized that some victories were indeed worth more than any championship ring.